Good afternoon, y'all. So, I'm going to ask y'all to do me a little favor. Between now and the time you walk out of the door, stop to ask somebody one question. Where your people from? I'm sure some of you have been asked this question, but I'm going to say it again so you know how to say it. Where your people from? I love this question, and it has so many different responses. None of them wrong, right? For some of us, our people are from lands that are far and even that we're estranged from. For others of us, our people are close by where the lands we've touched and we can feel the soil every time we think of it. And for others of us, our lands are exactly where we're at, where we've made family ties through our shared love and familiarity and not through a shared DNA. I remember the first time I was asked this question. I was traveling down through the Carolinas and this beautiful elder woman sitting on her porch said, "Baby, where your people from?" It was like honey to my ears. She offered me this opportunity for us to figure out the ways in which we were kin, and we were honoring one another's ancestors. And the question also gave me the chance to put my people somewhere in land, in space, across this globe. I could feel this deep sense of belonging when she asked me that question, like I knew and she knew that we belonged to each other. I've asked this question probably over 100 times in backwoods and meditation halls, in churches and mediations between couples as a means of helping us remember where we came from so we know where we're going. All right, so I'll answer the question. Where are my people from? You can't tell say where them from. Shoes off and everything. You know say where me from? Yes. My father is from Jamaica. My people were marooned on the shores of Jamaica, took to the hills of St. Mary, Montreal Bush to be exact, and were led to towns of freedom by a mystic woman named Queen Nanny. Yes, I am, and my descendants are maroon people. My mother's people congregated, met, and were brought to Mississippi. They make up a beautiful cauldron of all different kinds of people. My eldest grandfather even. He is the last legal native Choctaw member. This question didn't really become so important to me around about till a year ago. So for the last 9 years, I've been practicing as a Buddhist. For the last 5, I've been teaching the Dharma, or what in popular culture is called mindfulness and meditation. So one morning last year, I was teaching a 30-minute meditation in this very posh studio in the West End to a very diverse group of people just like this. And in the back of the room, there was an elder. At the end of class, the elder came to me and she asked me 3 questions. How the hell do I sit on this seat for 30 minutes? Small round cushions for sitting in meditation. She wanted to know more about posture. The second question, where was the meditation that I offered? Where did it come from? And the third, where did Buddhism come from? All right. So that morning, I taught what is called a Japanese Soto Zen meditation. Zen came from India through China, across to Japan in and around the 8th century. Made its way to me around about 9 or 8 years ago. And I learned from my well-intentioned white teachers who learned from their teachers who came in the 50s to start the first schools. That morning, something life-changing happened. My elder friend who came and asked me a question was an elder Japanese woman who was brought here just after being born. She came to my class for the same reason like many others, to settle the mind, to get free. I couldn't have predicted what would happen in that moment, these tears started welling up in my eyes. It took everything in me, y'all, to stop myself from crying. My DNA understood what it felt like to have somebody else feed back my ancestors' stories and offerings to this world that I had never learned in school. I'll give you a quick, short history. In and around about 1868, the West and its large economic power came to Japan, and Japan, like many of us, all of our countries, were a little shook. Thinking about how to help make sure the people stayed alive, they thought real fast and quick and decided to pull bits and pieces of the culture, the traditions, the recipes, ideas of landscape, art, all these things into one identity that made up a homogeneous Japan so that it could be packaged and sold, forgetting so many stories behind. Yes, that morning, what my body knew was the same story my ancestors knew. When they had to cut their hair, change their language, do something different to their dress, put away their drums, they understood they had to assimilate in order to survive. Does anybody else know about that in here? Yes, that's where those tears came from. And in that moment, I was tasked with a great responsibility. From that day forward, it wasn't about the textbooks that I read. It wasn't about how many times I sat on a cushion. It was about understanding that these traditions came from a people, from ancestors who future generations may need to come to any one of us in our globalized world to learn more. So I had an idea. This concept called right stewardship. Right in the context of the Dharma, our actions, our way of being, our livelihood that we can do, choices we can make in order to make sure all beings are well and safe. Stewardship. Well, I learned this one being in a church as a child. You know, when the usher board came down the aisles and created a circle around that person who was filled with the Spirit trying to get free. They circled around them in order to make sure they were safe on their way to liberation. You understand what I'm talking about? So I knew that if my choices, my actions, where I lived, what I bought, had any relationship to sustaining a people across this globe, then now was the time to consider how I could be in right stewardship to all my friends and family. The first time I met right stewardship was when I came to Flatbush. Y'all, let me tell you how much I love Flatbush. I mean, I love Flatbush. Initially, I came to Flatbush after trying to apply for a home in Brownsville. The specific area was Weeksville, one of the first freed towns after the Civil War for Black folks. My realtor at that time told me I was too Black to get an apartment. Well, it's all good. I came to Flatbush. And I did that by hopping on a dollar van. Y'all know what that is? AA, right? It's that dollar van that used to be $1, now $2, owned and operated by first-gen and migrant folks that have come throughout the Caribbean. They travel up and down the MTA line, and it only cost you $2. So I took that dollar van, I got off at Flatbush in Caton, and in front of me was the most ridiculous bevy of fruits and vegetables I'd ever seen in my life. But they were familiar because they were all in my grandmama's cooking. I mean, breadfruit, aki, bami. These were familiar fruits to me. Then I walked in to get my plantain chips. On one ear, I heard the most beautiful patois. On the left, I heard the most clear Haitian Creole I have ever heard in my life. I knew I was home. I left there. I went down to the Church Avenue stop, right on Caton, and that's when I saw it, y'all. Right stewardship in real time. There was a truck there, probably about as big as like an icy truck. Okay? And this woman behind it was selling the most ridiculous tamales, elote, champadura you have ever tasted in your life. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can trust the line of all kinds of people that were extending from behind. I mean, even they had my Rasta family, long locks. How hot is your pepper sauce? You wait a little longer, the sister with the door knocker earrings came by and said, wait a second, but what kind of chocolate you put in your champadura? I knew I was home. And I wanted to understand how to be in this home from those who had lived in this space and place for many years. I was just an implant. So Flatbush has been the home to so many. The Dutch came here with African slaves, and then after that, it became the home to Jewish, Polish, Russian families. And now the majority of the population are all first-gen and migrant families that have come from South and Central America and the West Indies. Yeah, this is Flatbush. This is the same home that the sister behind that elote truck, who's Mexican Chicana, said that this is the safest place she feels because she can feel the connection between peoples. So when I got here, I did 3 things in order to help me understand how to become a member of community. I listened, I learned, and I stayed humble. Sitting, watching, looking at how these communities had formed a safety ring around their children was the way I was going to understand my place in this space. And the way that I understood what space I was occupying and what I could contribute to the community that was here. What I'd learned is that through gentrification, so many of the mom and pop shops that the community depended on for health care alternatives or ways to take care of their children after schools, all of these meeting grounds for where communities were gathered were disappearing. Like our family over at Scoops on Flatbush. One of the first I Tell vegetarian spots in Brooklyn. Yeah, I knew that somehow, though, all of these new industries and businesses that were coming in that were super well-intentioned needed to understand how to be in community. And my family and friends, well, they were becoming a little intimidated and feeling like those spaces were not places where they could access, didn't belong to them. So some natives of Flatbush, long-term residents of Canarsie and Brownsville, and I got together and formed what's called the Flatbush Community Freedom School. It's a space where businesses and entrepreneurs who have these similar resources to those that were depended upon by the communities now have the chance to offer workshops to share more about what they do and then to learn from the community what is needed in order to keep them accessible. This was my understanding of how I contribute to the place. This was what I was offered the opportunity to contribute inside of the space that I was occupying. It may be different from all of us. But I will say, through right stewardship, through seeing the ways in which, through language, through food, these families of ours shared one another's traditions in order to help keep each other well and safe, I learned that the most important thing we can do is to listen, to learn, and to stay humble. So I'm going to ask us all to continue that tradition. Right stewardship. Right stewardship taught me something really, really deep. It was earlier this spring. I was offering a class called Song of the Spirit. It's a practice that continues to support the sustainability of African and indigenous diasporic traditions so that they don't die. Just like so many of the languages and cultures and traditions of so many of us, including our First Native, our First Nations people. So during that class, I was doing what I was told and what I was taught to do, which was to honor the land. How many of y'all know that Flatbush's real name is called Canarsie? And how many of you know that this entire territory that makes up New York is actually Lenape-Koying? So we're going to do that again so we can say it together, because this is how we make sure a people don't die. We help up to lift up the name, the history, and the language. So Canarsie was the name for this area, particularly because of the Canarsie natives. And this entire New York City is called Lenape-Koying. Beautiful. So that's the first thing I learned from my brothers and sisters when I did what I consider to be the next beautiful offering of right stewardship. I leaned in and had a courageous conversation. It might be courageous. Or it just might be an opportunity to understand the ways we belong to one another. What I learned when I dialed up the Lenape Center over at Staten Island and I talked to my brother Arden, and he told me, he said, well, yes, it's important that we speak the name of this place and its people as often as possible. So if we can, make sure we spread it like wildflower so even our babies know. But then he also said another thing. Can't just stop there, because the Lenape and the Canarsie people have not died. They're very much living. And so if we continue that particular story, then we run the risk of having them invisibilized till they're gone. So, Lenape family in Ramapo, Lenape, up around Pennsylvania, Lenape family around Ringwood, New Jersey are very much alive. And so are their traditions. In Ringwood, New Jersey, right now there's a huge Superfund that's been there for a while after the Ford factory left, now causing cancer for over hundreds of people. This is what my brother Owl wanted me to share with all of you. So we collectively, as folks who have been graciously supported by the land of Canarsie and Lenape-Koying, can continue to support our brothers and sisters of Lenape and Canarsie people. There are so many ways that we can learn their stories by contacting and learning directly from the nation themselves right at the Lenape Center in Staten Island. Visit the reservation in Ramapo, Lenape. But build our awareness of the ground we're walking on. All of us. That's keeping us all safe. All right, so let's go back over it again so we're clear. Right stewardship. Right stewardship first teaches us how we think about the ways we consume the cultures and traditions of all of our people, because they're tied to a people. Second, wherever we are, in whatever place and space we're in, we think, we learn, we listen, we humble ourselves if we're moving in, and we consider how we can best be responsible and accountable to the safety of all the people who live in that community. And last, we can remember the people who have been here and we may not see, but who have made this land so strong and this ground so fertile for all of us to live and thrive, making sure we all are safe, we all are well, and we all get free. Yakoke.